Hi, welcome to Wonders of Creation, Art, Science, and Innovation in the Islamic World. My name is Ladan Akbarnia, and I am the curator of South Asian and Islamic art here at the San Diego Museum of Art. I am going to take you through a very quick walkthrough of the exhibition, especially for those of you who won't have the chance to see it while it's on view. Right now, we're in what I like to call the antechamber to the exhibition. This is the room where you can see an introduction to the exhibition. You'll see the title. There's a map as well that gives you a sense of how vast the regions covered by objects in this exhibition are. This exhibition was brought together as part of the San Diego Museum of Art's participation in the Ph.D. art initiative that is supported by the Getty Foundation. 800 years ago, an Islamic scholar and judge by the name of Zakaria ibn Muhammad Al-Qazwini wrote the world into a book. These are the first words that you see on the panel behind me. You're probably wondering, what is Wonders of Creation? What does this exhibition refer to? Well, Wonders of Creation refers to this text written by Qazwini in the 13th century on the heels of two Mongol invasions. It was a cosmography, and its full title was The Wonders of Creation and the Rarities of Existence. And it was a description of the entire universe, a natural history, if you will, a sort of encyclopedic structure that had two main sections, one on the heavens, one on the earth. But really, the author was describing everything from the heavens to the earth and in between. At the beginning of this text, Qazwini calls upon the reader to look at the world through the lens of wonder, because wonder, as he defines it, is that perplexity that we feel when we don't understand the cause or the impact of something. And by asking questions, by contemplating whatever it is that we see in the world, which are signs of divine creation, we actually learn, not just for the sake of learning, for the pure joy of learning, but also because that's what brings us closer to God. Qazwini was an Islamic scholar. He was a Muslim, so this text is grounded in that. But it wasn't the first cosmography that was written. It wasn't the first cosmography of this title that was written. But somehow this particular text had a tremendous impact on the Islamic world and on the wonders genre of literature. And I thought this would be the perfect way to look at the wide range, the rich breadth and depth of Islamic art and material culture, and to be able to introduce this to the San Diego community and to bring some old favorites for those who really know this material very well. So I think I'd love to start by showing you one particular work that really drew me in, that I see as the kind of opening work to the show. All right, we're in part one of the exhibition, which is about Qazwini, really. It's called In Pursuit of Wonder, and it consists of three sections. So each of the four parts of the exhibition have different subsections in them. The first part is really focusing on Qazwini and the cosmography itself. So you'll see this section is about Qazwini's life and his world when he wrote the book, the types of objects that he would have been familiar with and possibly used. And it focuses on the fact that he fled the first Mongol invasion, and after the second one, he actually was patronized by Mongol patrons, and that's when he wrote the book. And we know at least of one copy that was written in 1260, believed to be by his hand. He wrote this text in both Persian and Arabic, and there are slight differences to the versions. But you can see, looking down, that the second subsection is called the cosmography, and you'll see examples of copies of this text completed between the 15th and 18th centuries. In this area, we have something also later, a lithograph version later in the exhibition, and they show you the structure of the cosmography. This part of the first, this subsection of the first part of the exhibition focuses on the cosmography itself. What is a cosmography? The fact that it's a natural history, the fact that it's encyclopedic, but it's not necessarily in alphabetical order. The fact that Qazwini drew from all different types of sources to write this book. He drew from established scientific information, much of it translated into Arabic from Greek, also Syriac, other texts. There was a huge translation movement between the 8th and 10th centuries that brought that knowledge to him. But also the fact that cosmographies are different and very interesting in the sense that they are able to provide knowledge that's not necessarily established scientific fact. So that's where you can have some of the entertainment, some of the whimsical qualities of the book. And in both the way he wrote the Arabic and the Persian, he has that. And the images helped bring that element of entertainment. What's also interesting is, why did Al-Qazwini write this book during this tumultuous time? Well, partly to preserve information, to preserve knowledge, which he's clearly shows that he values by the fact that he wants us to also contemplate and wonder and use that as a way to gain knowledge, which brings us closer to God, but also because it provided solace at a difficult time. It provided entertainment. These books were meant to keep your eyes lingering on the page. And we see in this section really a range of also the development of painting in the Islamic world during this time. The focus is mainly to the Persianate and Ottoman realms. And then we have one case that focuses on the special Persian edition, which differed from the Arabic version that he wrote. All right, this case is dedicated to the early Persian edition of Qazwini's cosmography. It differs from the Arabic in that in the section on the terrestrial realm, which is actually a description going through the different kingdoms, mineral, plant, animals, there's a section in the animal kingdom on humans who are described first as they're sort of at the top of the hierarchy. There's a very hierarchical structuring to the entire text. And Qazwini talks about human diversity, their customs, crafts, and the crafts are a set of 20 crafts or skills that are particular to humanity. And they range from medicine to carpentry, to making talismans or astrolabes, to magic squares. It's a very interesting range. And there are different theories and even new research being done on what was behind the differences and the distinctions of this particular version, this edition. These two manuscripts are open to pages from that section, one of which is on the section on carpentry, which shows you Noah's Ark, and Qazwini describes that, Noah being the quintessential carpenter, and a water-raising device, as well as an automata, which was created to pour liquid into a cup. And then images that people would be advised to create if they wanted to harness celestial forces, like for a talisman, which would be an object on Earth that you would use to harness the celestial forces, such as on the application of Venus or the Sun or Mars. We're now in the last part of In Pursuit of Wonder, the section on Qazwini and the cosmography, and it really ends with a closer look at a part of the manuscript that's dedicated is actually throughout the whole manuscript. There are these creatures, these strange creatures that live, some of them at the peripheries of the universe. But it's also a section on the legacy of the text, because we're coming out of a section where we see so many copies of this manuscript that were copied, or so many examples of manuscripts that were copied. This text had a tremendous impact. In the title of the text, The Wonders of Creation and Rarities of Existence, rarities represent wonders as well, but they're those wonders that we rarely see or experience. And that's why they get a different name, whereas not all wonders can be rarities. So that could be a strange creature, a hybrid creature that we couldn't imagine seeing today, but it could also be a comet. And wonders can be the most ordinary things, like the leaf, or looking at a beehive and admiring all of the cells of that beehive. And ultimately, all of these come down to divine creation, that these, for Qazwini, are first and foremost the wonders of God's creation. And having that in mind, we take a journey through the celestial and terrestrial realm. So you'll see behind me, actually, the beginning of that journey, the blue representing the heavens. So the celestial realm, really the focus is on astronomy, astrology. You'll see objects throughout the exhibition that could probably fit in different places. So looking at a magic bowl, for example, that's something that could also be seen later in the section on medicine, where we look at the skills and crafts of humankind. I wanted to introduce Islam also in this exhibition, and this seemed to be the best place to do it. Qazwini has a hierarchy to his text, Everything starts with God. So when you're describing creation, all creation, you start at the top, the celestial realm, where the angels live. So we have an image of an angel in this section. We also have some Qurans, which is the holy book that Muslims use. It literally means the recitation. And we have examples of Qurans from Mongol Iran, during Al-Qazwini's lifetime, but also an 18th century Quran from China, or a West African Quran that's not bound and can be carried, and you can see similar ones in Nigeria. We also have objects that are and these can carry talismanic associations. If you wear or say or carry the word of God, the word of the Prophet Muhammad, or his close companions, this would be a talismanic object that could bring you protection, or to ward off evil or illness. So that is the sort of theme of this section, but also it's a way to start with God. And from here, we move into the second two sections of this part two, which is the celestial realm, which are astronomy and astrology. Now we're fully in the celestial realm. We're taking the journey with Qazwini, and Qazwini talks a lot in this section about topics that really fall under the fields of astronomy, astrology. One of the things that I meant to do in this exhibition was to show all these different fields of knowledge as being under this wider realm of ilm. Ilm in Arabic means science. It also means knowledge. So we see science and craft, science and art as really under the same umbrella. Astronomy and astrology, especially in the medieval Islamic world, were also very interrelated. They both also have to do with timekeeping. So I really wanted to show elements of that, or illustrations of timekeeping and the importance in the Islamic world. So we start with seeing this magnificent globe from Maragh, Iran. So the globe itself is a really important piece that actually hasn't left the museum that it's in Germany in over 200 years. And it's connected to a specific place in Iran, to a specific astronomer whose father was an even more famous astronomer who worked for a more famous one. And they are presenting on the globe, and the astrolabs, a lot of the manuscripts that you see are building upon a foundation that was created by an astronomer in the 10th century named Al-Sufi. Al-Sufi actually compared all of the Arabic stars and constellations with those of Ptolemy in his Almagest, and his contribution was to show the different views of constellations, both as we see them when we look up at the night sky and as they would be seen from above. So when you look at a celestial globe, you see the view from above. And in manuscripts, we have examples of, different versions. You could either have mirroring constellations or you could have them on either side of a page. So this section really shows you manuscripts that talk about astronomy or explain how to make instruments that are related to astronomy, such as astrolabs, which were meant for timekeeping or finding the direction of Mecca, which was the direction of prayer for Muslims. This instrument developed really well, beautifully in this world because there was a need for it. But you can think of astrolabs as they're a kind of computer for their times. They had several applications, or like your iPhone. I cannot, for the life of me, I'm not even going to attempt to be able to explain an astrolabe. There are people who can do it much better than I can. But we were really lucky to be able to borrow a number of them, especially from collections in Kuwait and Malaysia, that allow us to show you the craftsmanship, and also how in different regions, the style of that craftsmanship changes. So these are not only instruments that function and are made to function and to do their jobs, but also are representations of the mastery of craft, especially with metalwork. So you see in the Persianate world, you have these more ornate styles. You have more the simpler styles that are in the Arab lands, especially early on. We're also very lucky to have one of the earliest Islamic astrolabs on view here from the Al-Sabah collection in Kuwait, and actually an example of a sundial, an astrolabe by Yazdi, one of the most famous astronomers. He was from Iran, from the Safavid period, on loan to us from the Islamic Arts Museum in Malaysia. All right, I didn't want to leave this section without pausing at one of my favorite works in the exhibition. This is one of our 2 commissions supported by the National Endowment for the Arts. This one was done by the artist Ala Ibtikar. He's an Iranian-American artist based in the Bay Area. He also produced the work Zenith. This particular one is the product of many conversations that Ala and I had. He's done a different series on the moon and exposure to moonlight. He's very interested. He's always been interested in light, time, the idea of transcendence, even migration across the Islamic world. And he has collected over his lifetime. He's the child of 2 activists who are also, I guess you could say, bibliophiles, book lovers. And he used to be taken to bookstores with his parents as a child. And he really has amassed a collection that he has as well of works that really interest him in old books. For this project, he has done projects in the past where he will he'll take pages from old printed books, lithograph printed, regular printed books, and then do exposures of the moon on them or the sun on them using each of these parts. Here, you're actually looking at an image of the sun taken by the solar orbiter on the 7th of March, 2024. So just, very recently. And he superimposed, that's a composite image in itself of about 25 shots of the sun. It's superimposed over 15 copper plates that have reproductions from manuscripts that talk about light. Some of them are astronomers, some are mathematicians, some are, a few of these panels are pages from lithographed pages of Qazwini's text. And these are reproductions that are taken, I think many of them from the Library of Congress, and they range in terms of the origin of the text from the 11th to the 17th century, and they were in manuscripts that were copied from the 13th to the 19th. So imagine about 1,000 years, this work is called 1,000 Years of Light, but 1,000 years of conversations about the light, about time, about the sun. And here the artist is actually in conversation and dialogue with those. And it's very much, in my mind, in the spirit of Qazwini's call to wonder, to look at the world and also to realize that we are just small parts in that world, but also that we're all related. So we're related to each other, not only across media and across geographies, but also across time and space. And so this is really only one of the many things that comes out of this fantastic work. So we're still in the celestial realm. You can still see the blue around me. And the section on astrology actually really sort of bleeds in, or the section on astronomy bleeds into that of astrology, because they're very interrelated. And astrology was really seen as the nature of the bond between the celestial and the terrestrial realms. This corner is really a nod to Indic astrology, and as well as just to show that astrology wasn't necessarily only coming from a Greek foundation, that there was a lot of interaction or meeting of different cultural veins, different traditions. So we're looking at examples of works that really show Indic astrology, Hindu astrology. This piece, however, which is really one of the sort of stars in the exhibition, is what's called a star chart or a star map. And it is interesting because it represents a superposition of the 27 lunar mansions of Indic or Hindu astrology superimposed over those that we are more familiar with from the Islamic world and the Greek side of astrology that's really coming from a Greek tradition. And they're labeled, the Indic ones they're nakshatras and constellations that are labeled in Devanagari script, which is the Indic script, and it's very difficult to see from here. This particular painting is attributed to Jaipur in India, and it's to the time of a ruler known as Jai Singh II, who was a Maharaja who was also a vassal to one of the Mughal emperors, the Muslim emperors of the time. It's about the 18th century. Jai Singh II was known for his support or his patronage of astronomy. He commissioned many manuscripts, but he also built a number of observatories, and really the largest in Jaipur, after a major observatory that we know about that was built in Samarkand in the Timurid period, or looking back at the 15th century. It's also related. What's really, really fascinating about this is not only do you have this superimposition of different forms of astrology, but also different connections, different aesthetic traditions. So you have a sort of Persianate tradition that comes here. There's a lot of flow between artists from the court in Iran to India that went back and forth and would have been working with each other. You have the local population, the Hindu artists, the indigenous population of India. You also have finally also the Jesuits who were arriving via Goa to India and bringing with them these woodcut maps, like star maps, which is what this is based on. If you think of Albert Dürer, for example, who was also aware of Al-Sufi, the astronomer that I mentioned before, and all of these traditions sort of come together in India and are incorporated in this really beautiful, harmonious way, unlike many places, unlike almost any other place that I'm aware of. And so I'm really happy that we were able to share this with the public. It comes from a private collection in Chicago. So now, as you may guess, we are in the terrestrial realm. Qazwini, when he finishes his discussion of the celestial realm, talks about the four elements, fire, air, water, and ending up on Earth. So when we learn about the seas and the creatures of the seas and the islands in the seas, those actually happen before we get to Earth. The section on the Earth in the exhibition is divided similarly to Qazwini's text, beginning with minerals, the mineral kingdom, plant kingdom, and the animal kingdom. But because of the way exhibitions work and some objects being different sizes, one of the most significant works in this section is by the artist Pantea Karimi, who's also based in Northern California, in the Bay Area. And this is called Folding Gardens. It's referencing these digitally printed, these are digital drawings by the artist herself of plants that she observed in a 12th century manuscript, an Andalusian manuscript that is a botanical manuscript by Al-Qazwini. And she created these designs and then printed them digitally on silk organza material, and they sort of cascade down in these banners, and you see their roots that are represented by threads below. Some of them are red. This particular one is sort of, this is the second part of the title. This actual work is called Folding Gardens, Stained Memory. And you're looking at the stained memory part of the object or of the installation, which references a particular memory of the artist. This work is really an homage to Karimi's grandmother and to her childhood in Shiraz, Iran. Shiraz, which is sort of centrally located in Iran, is famous for its beautiful gardens, these beautiful Persian gardens that she used to walk through with her grandmother explaining the different plants and their properties, their physical properties, and their healing properties. She was very interested in healing medicine. And so Karimi has this wonderful memory of that. And this was an homage to her grandmother and those gardens. But it's also reflects her interest in science. She was originally training to become a physician. She became an artist. She's interested in European medieval botanicals, Islamic medieval botanicals. So she looks at a lot of them and she brings them out in her work. This particular one also brings out a memory from childhood in Iran when the war with Iraq was going on in the late 70s, and 80s, actually, I should say. She was leaving her classroom. They were told to leave the classroom to go to another area, and she fell and almost blinded one of herself in one eye. And there was a lot of blood that was the result. She bled a lot, and that stained the classroom floor. And so that's where that comes from. Normally, this piece comes there. You can hear the sound of a fountain, water from a fountain. We have this sound element. There's also a volvel that has been adapted to turned by the viewer or the visitor, and you can look at the image of any of these plants, and then you can see what their identification is and what their properties are. So I love this work because it really appeals to a number of senses. And this is also another way that wonder really comes out of a work. There's a lot of, you really have to be engaged, and the more you engage, the more you get out of it. All right, so in the terrestrial realm, I've focused the first few objects are objects that show the interest of humanity in nature and the world we live in. We start with a couple images of Alexander the Great. There are a lot of stories throughout the text that involve figures that are known across cultures. And Alexander the Great is one of them because he was known to be the sort of quintessential collector, that objects of navigation too. So really, the first point we're making in this section is that there is this interest on the part of humans to understand the world that we live in, especially the world that we can see from day to day, that's sort of tangible to us. This painting is from a manuscript of the Baburname, which are the memoirs of Babur, the founder of the Mughal Empire that ruled from, the early 16th century through the mid-19th century. Babur was one of the last Timurid princes of Iran and Central Asia, and he fled other dynasties or powers that were coming into his region. And he fled Afghanistan and Uzbekistan and ended up in India, where he founded his empire in Delhi. And throughout that text, which was originally written in Chagatai Turkish, he describes all of the many species, the several species that he encounters along the way. And this particular page is really just so relevant to this exhibition because he talks in the lower image about the date palm. And this is one of the last species described in Al-Qazwini's cosmography. And the way that Babur describes it is so similar to the way it's described in the Wonders text by Al-Qazwini that surely he had access to that. And it just shows us again how impactful that text was, and very appropriate, for a prince, for a ruler, for those whose part of their education was really also to be knowledgeable about the world around them. So this section, so it sort of leads us into the plant section. And in this section, we really look at works that represent the plant kingdom, but also works that represent the kingdom that is described before it, which is the mineral kingdom across the way. So this area that we're standing in is dedicated to the mineral kingdom in the terrestrial realm. So it's really one of the few subsections of this part of the exhibition. It is a bifolio, 2 pages attached, of an object that is sort of famously referred to as the Blue Quran. And the way it was made, it dates to the 9th to 10th century. It's one of the earliest pieces in the exhibition. And there have been there's been a lot of research on it. And what we know is that these works were written on indigo-dyed parchment, and the words of the Quran, the verses, were written in gold, which you see here. And what you don't see, because it's been oxidized, is the silver rosettes and the markings that would mark the end of a verse. What's interesting is usually for these Qurans, you can just read a few things. I mean, I can make out the word for God, Allah, in a few places. And from there, you kind of work out some other words. And then we usually find out, okay, where in the Quran it is, and we can tell you what verse it is. Interestingly, with this particular one on this page, the verses don't seem to line up, which is such a mystery, especially for a Quran that was made of this quality, which is just a really fascinating observation that we wouldn't know unless we took the time to look at it more closely. So not only are you rewarded if you hone in on something like this, where you can actually see the grains of gold, or where the silver is oxidized, or just the texturing of the folios, But if you can read the language, whether you're understanding that it's in Arabic and that it's Quranic, that's one element, one layer of knowledge, or whether you actually try to place something or learn more about it, you're constantly given these gifts with every moment that you spend, every moment of contemplation, which evokes increasing amounts of wonder. The section on minerals includes works that represent, gold, which is considered the noblest of minerals in the cosmography. But also there are a number of objects that come from the Mughal period in India, and you see this interest in gems and jewelry, works that are gems that are set in gold in interesting ways that are specific to regions. You also see this spinel that looks like a ruby. This is like a harder version of that stone. And that spinel has 3 different signatures on it of 3 different Mughal emperors. So these were objects that were also passed from generation to generation or given as gifts. You're looking now at this tiger claw necklace that represents, again, the meeting of Indic astrology with the Islamic world. So the type of technique, the gold technique used to set these gems into gold is known as kundan, which is an ancient Indian technique, and it was practiced a lot under the Mughals. All right, as we leave the mineral and plant kingdoms and we're approaching the animal kingdom, in between there's a section that's dedicated to the transformation of matter. What happens when minerals come together? What happens when heat and earth are joined? That's where we have a case dedicated to pottery, molds that are made, glazes that are made from minerals to give them color. Luster painted glass. We have an entire case then on the technique of luster, which is really the Islamic world's contribution to the rest of the world, an incredible innovation that was shared and started on glass in Egypt, moved to Iraq, onto ceramics, and to Egypt as well, to Iran, and then finally to the large dish in the middle, which is Spain and even Italy and Britain. And so this area is really looking at the transformation of matter, alchemy, and all these things that are brought together by also the intellect of science that humans discovered, but also the intellect of the hand, the artisan's hand. And we also have a section that is a wall dedicated to a project of scientific examination of a number of works from our famous collection of works on paper, the Edmund Binney III collection, where we can look and see which minerals were used for the pigments of a painting that you see on the wall. The last subsection in part 3, the terrestrial realm, is focusing on the animal kingdom. And at the top of that hierarchy are humans. So we have one image representing humans. But interestingly enough, in the text, in this section, you don't see so many images of different kinds of humans. You read more about stories. So images of people really come up more in the stories throughout the book, throughout the text. So there is a hierarchy to the animal kingdom, and Al-Qazwini starts with the humans, who are like a microcosm of the entire cosmos. They are the closest to angels, so they come first. Then he goes to beasts of burden. He describes ruminants. He talks about feral beasts like the lion and elephant. And so images of these all appear as you walk through this last section, and then enter part 4, which is still the terrestrial realm, but it's treated separately as a focus on some of the crafts that are described in the special Persian edition of Al-Qazwini's cosmography. This work is also by the artist Pantea Karimi. It's called Suspended Healing Gardens. And it sort of straddles the line between the terrestrial realm section and the section on crafts. The first part of the craft section of part 4 of the exhibition is dedicated to medicine healing and protection. So this seemed like a really lovely work to help us transition from the end of the animal kingdom into this deeper dive into humanity and the crafts of humanity, the skills described by Al-Qazwini. Why is it related to medicine, well, these plants, these are laser cut. It's laser cut paper that has printed on it pages from that same manuscript by the Andalusian physician Al-Qazwini, 12th century botanical. And each of these describes a particular plant. Usually they come with information about the habitat, their healing properties, and they've been carefully threaded with these metal threads on these metal rods with sort of fishing rod thread. And each one was really deliberately placed by the artist and our team here at SDMA. And the effect is what you see here. I mean, it's mesmerizing. You walk through, you see, it's almost as if the plants come to life. And so you're not only, the work is not only referencing a topic that's important in this exhibition and to the cosmography, healing, medicine, what are the plants, where is it coming from, physicians, but also just the experience of seeing them almost as if they were alive in nature. And of course, upside down. I find it mesmerizing. So we're now at the beginning of part 4 of the exhibition. This section is called Humanity, Customs, and Crafts, and it is dedicated to part of the Persian edition of Qazwini's Cosmography, which had this expanded section in the discourse on humans and the animal kingdom that was really focused on humanities, customs, and crafts. What's really interesting is among these crafts, Qazwini lists 20 crafts that are particular to humanity and talks about how there are essential kinds and there are desirable kinds. So medicine is considered a craft or skill, and it's important for obvious reasons. Physicians also held a really important role in medieval Islamic society, and they're also figures who carry a lot of knowledge. So knowledge is constantly a theme. But there are also, agriculture is also essential. Carpentry could be seen as essential because it's what creates shelters for us. Adornment might be seen as something more desirable. But all of these were important. And Qazwini really emphasizes this and the importance of everything that every practitioner does. Every practitioner has their craft, and every one of these has its place in the world. So this room focuses on crafts that have to do with healing, protection, medicine. So we look at a page from Qazwini's text that is focused on the plant colocynth and its properties, its healing properties. That could also have been something that we saw in the section on the plant kingdom. But here it makes sense for medicine. We also see an image of a physician who's making medicine from honey. This comes from an Arabic copy of a text by the 1st century Greek physician Dioscorides. And this particular manuscript describes all of these plants and, again, their properties, their habitats, and their healing properties. And so we see a source, one of the main sources that Qazwini used for this part of the text and for the plant kingdom. I love this particular case. Just like in the section on astronomy, we have a number of manuscripts that are telling us, giving us theory, or teaching manuscripts, or one is on anatomy. It's written in Persian. We have another that's also on human anatomy, but includes surgical instruments. That's written in Arabic. The third manuscript is from Malaysia. It's written in Malay, and it includes information on how to calm a child so that they'll go to sleep. It brings in spells. Spells were also local traditions, and pre-existing traditions, healing traditions, were also incorporated in Islamic medical history and in these manuscripts. So you'll see some of those come together. And the final manuscript is a veterinary manuscript. It's a manual on horse care for horses and also horse veterinary medicine. So that one is written in Urdu. So in one case, we have 4 different languages, different parts of the world, and the last one is actually written in verse, rhyming verse as well, which is really another, actually it's another skill that is described by Al-Qazwini, prosody or versification. And then behind me, you'll see another case that shows you medical instruments, different medical instruments that were used, have been used, are used across the Islamic world. And then 2 cases that are dedicated to adornment, but these can also have healing properties. So where silver had associations with protection. This is a Turkmen headdress that shows a lot of silver, which was worn a lot by women. It's also a way of carrying wealth. And then we have other works, mirrors, bath scrapers in the shape of animals that were used in hammams, which are known, some of these are known to have had images of animals on the walls, or more examples of gem set jewelry, jewel-encrusted ornaments, or mirrors that had talismanic qualities. So the entire section is really focused on healing, medicine, medical properties, and all of these are really important in the craft section. All right, in this final gallery of the exhibition, we continue through part 4 on humanity, customs, and crafts, looking at objects that represent aspects of the skills, of these 20 skills or crafts described by Al-Qazwini in the Persian edition of his text. So we look at weaving. This is one of the works that really illustrates weaving, a work by Faig Ahmed from Azerbaijan, who does these digitally printed images that reflect the Persian carpet tradition. And I just love this because it kind of spills out into our picture plane unexpectedly. And behind me, you'll see works in this area, all of which focus on writing and prosody, 2 other crafts that are listed by Al-Qazwini in his cosmography. Writing is really important. It's actually something that is, has very strong associations with in Islam because of the Quran and its revelation. In this section that focuses on writing and prosody or versification, we look at the arts of the book. And we see this in calligraphy, which is a really important art, especially in Islamic tradition, because of the connection to the Quran. So behind me, you see examples of large-scale works that show either mirrored calligraphy. So we have a verse of the Quran that's presented in this triangular piece by a Japanese calligrapher that has the word God at the top as the only word not mirrored, and the rest of the verse is mirrored on from right to left. Behind that is a work from the San Diego Museum of Art's collection by Puran Jinchi. This is a work of hers that brings verses from the very well-known poet Omar Khayyam, who was also known as a mathematician, astronomer, and his work is reflected, is very much embedded in the ideas that come out of this exhibition. What the artist has done here, she's trained in traditional Persian calligraphy, but she brings a contemporary twist to it. She deconstructs these letters and then forms another composition, building from the units of those letters. And I just find that to be a really beautiful, whimsical work. And other works that either show really wondrous techniques like cutout calligraphy, where this beautiful poetic calligraphic script is brought out in cut letters, or tools that are reflective of bookmaking, whether pen boxes that hold pens or binding tools, covers that show animals, real and fantastical. And then we have this sculpture, which is a little hard to see from here, that reflects 2 examples of the word hiç, which means nothing, that are kind of coupled together as though they are embracing. And these come from the work of Parviz Tanapoli, who's done a whole series of these sculptures. And there are definitely some Sufi associations that one can interpret through the idea of nothingness and the fact that the Sufi spend a lifetime trying to strip themselves of anything material, worldly aspirations, so that they can leave room in their body really to receive God and become one with God. So it's also funny in a way because it's very much a something and the word itself means nothing. From there, we really go into the craft of building, crafts that have to do with building. Carpentry would be part of that. Automata would be part of that. And this allowed us in the last part of the exhibition to look at mathematics, geometry, and mechanics, and look at aspects of Islamic artistic traditions that are reflected in architecture as well as objects and contemporary art. The very last part of the exhibition is in the subsection on building, on the built environment. And what I love about this part is that you look at these different types of structures, different architectural techniques that were innovations in the Islamic world, from a Jali screen to mukarnas, which are these elements that are then multiplied to create these beautiful non-weight-bearing structures, to Arabic joinery. And on the very end wall, you'll see this elevation, an architectural rendering showing an elevation of a mimbar or pulpit from a medieval mosque in Cairo, the Mosque of Qaitbay, and a panel next to it. And that panel is an example, a contemporary replica of a section of that mimbar. And it was created by a contemporary craftsman who's in his 70s. And really, the knowledge about these traditions will die with those who know them, or especially those who are in sort of the later parts of their lives. And so this is representing an effort by the Egyptian Heritage Rescue Foundation based in Cairo, not only to restore a number of these mimbars or pulpits across Cairo, which is one of the greatest preserved medieval cities in the Islamic world, but also to draw attention, and this is one of the objectives of the exhibition, especially at the end, was to draw attention to these living traditions that continue, and to try to encourage ways of supporting these efforts to restore them, especially when they're coming from within those traditions themselves. So those who are specialists in this in Cairo working on restoration of these works. So we've now come to the conclusion of Wonders of Creation, Art, Science, and Innovation in the Islamic World. I hope that you've enjoyed this really sort of whistle-stop tour through the exhibition. As you can see, there are so many works that really deserve a lot more time and attention, especially given that we're taking a look at this, at all of this Islamic art and material culture through the lens of wonder introduced by Al-Qazwini. I really wanted to achieve three things through this exhibition, which was meant to look at the intersections of art, science, and Islam. I really thought it was important to start with an Islamic framework, to look in literature or in cultural traditions of the Islamic world as a way to frame the exhibition. So that was one. Second, I really thought it was important, not only, especially to represent this wide breadth and depth of material culture from the Islamic world, across cultures, across boundaries of space and time, to really have a strong representation from within the Islamic world itself. And that's why we have collections from Kuwait, Malaysia, and Egypt in the exhibition, making up nearly half of the exhibition from just these three places, three collections. And finally, to draw attention to living traditions, to show that a lot of what we see, we're looking at historic works, but the reason for having these contemporary conversations and works that show these traditions is not just to say, and now there's something, and now here's what's happening today. These are very specific relationships with the topics covered in the book and also with the traditions that are described. So I hope that these come out in this tour, certainly in the exhibition, and I hope that you will continue to use this as an opportunity to look more closely at works and think about the ways that we interpret the world around us. Thank you.